everyone. My name is Ilona Gabinsky, and this is Aviz Networks podcast series. And today I'm joined by Roy Chua, who is a leading industry analyst and the founder of AvidThink, and also Vishal Shukla, who is the CEO and co-founder of Aviz Networks, and the author of the book that we will be discussing today. The book is called Deciding the Future, Building New Networks for the AI Era. So Roy and Vishal, thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Glad to be here.
So obviously there is a lot of noise around AI right now, but both of you are looking at something deeper, how AI is reshaping networking itself. So Roy, from your vantage point, what is actually changing in networking because of AI, and what are people still getting wrong?
Yeah. So couple of elements around AI. I think I'll talk about sort of two aspects, and I know Vishal likes this a lot. Networks for AI and AI for networks. That's the one thing I know Vishal always comes up with and says. So, and I agree. I completely agree with what Vishal is saying there. So let's start with maybe AI for networks, the AI ops elements. So I think what we're seeing is an ongoing shift from reactive to autonomous operations. So I think that's in progress. And I think in 2024 we're talking about chatbots and rack-powered assistants and stuff. But I think by 2025, the leading networking vendors all have some element of agentic systems that autonomously diagnose faults and generate remediation plans and execute some amount of config changes. And in 2026, I think that's continued to explode. And I think agentic capabilities like OpenClaw has just driven a lot more attention to this. I think that's on one side. On the other side, on the networks for AI, I think we're seeing a lot of physical networking being redesigned from scratch around AI workloads. AI training at scale, right? So 100,000 GPU clusters, at Meta or XAI Colossus type, scale. I think we're creating traffic patterns that the traditional networks were not designed for, especially on the backend side, and the ongoing sort of sustained petabytes a day of all reduced collectives, microsecond latency, parallel tensor parallelism that's required, things like that, right? I think are changing. And then obviously very, very recently we had seen some of this, the pre-field decode disaggregated inferencing stuff, and at GTC that we all were at, that was in one of the big items on stage for sure, right? With Vera Rubin. I think we're seeing a lot of changes on the model pre-training, fine-tuning, inferencing architecture, and so seeing a lot of that change in the data center and even outside as well. So I think that's what we're seeing that's changing in AI for networking and networking for AI.
Yeah, thank you, Roy, for bringing this up. This is obviously the main idea of the book, to discuss these two networks for AI and AI for networks. And thank you for kind of making this distinction. And I just have a quick follow-up question for you, and then Vishal, I'll have one for you as well. So do you see the market also making that distinction clearly, or the people still mixing the two together?
I think in the sophisticated market, right, meaning that a lot of people sort of in the know, I think the distinction is getting across, and I think that's from repeated messaging by people like you guys, right? Aviz Networks and Vishal repeating that. I think that's helpful. But when in conversations, people are not always very clear about what they're asking for. They just say, can you talk about AI networking? I say, well, which aspect of AI networking would you like me to talk about, right? And so I think we're not quite there in terms of being able to pre-distinguish in our minds the question that they're actually asking. And usually you have to use context to try to figure out what is the person actually asking and what conversation are we actually having. So we're not quite there yet. But I think once you do the follow-on question, that people are like, oh yeah, I meant AI ops, AI for networking, right? And it's like, oh, what do you mean? I'm talking about data center networking. I'm like, yeah, but still, I can use AI ops for data center networking. That doesn't help me, right? So making our way there, but I think there's the distinction still needs to be repeated, and I think it's still helpful that we continue to push the message.
Definitely. So Vishal, obviously Networks for AI and AI for Networks takes the major part of the book. And since people are still confused about the distinction. Can you explain it in a simple way for the audience from your point of view, and why even it's taken that major part of the book to start with?
Yeah. So the way we look at it is that break it down into two pieces, right? One is actually building the networks, really putting the networks together, building the infrastructure, right? And this infrastructure is actually put the racks together, do the cable, and bring the network up, right? And that's why it's infrastructure. And that's what we call that you're building the networks for the AI era, which means building the networks means really I'm talking about GPUs and DPUs and switches and network operating system. And essentially that itself needs a thought process that, from the bandwidth perspective, that you need to build something which is future proof in terms of bandwidth. The network has to be something which can understand the AI and non-AI traffic, right? It can understand variability of compute. You put CPU, you put DPU, or you put GPU, right? So all of that is, I take that as an infrastructure, and that aligns into networks for AI. So how do you build something which is built for AI workloads and AI compute, right? And that there is a thought process on that, how you do that, right? Now, second part is once you put down this infrastructure, how do you actually run it? Right. And for running that, if you just look at traditional ways of doing this, you just don't need the networks, right? Or the compute. Now you need the tools on top of it, right? You need the ITSM system, you need the security system, compliance system, visibility system, application performance management, network performance management. So those are all the tools which help you operate the infrastructure which you have put together. How do you introduce AI into that layer? So that's the AI for networks part, right? So building the networks is networks for AI. Operating the networks is actually AI for networks. That's how we look at it. And both of these dimensions are getting disrupted at a very high speed, because the definition of compute is changing on the infrastructure side, which is basically asking questions on how do you do networks for that kind of a stuff. And then every application today, any vendor coming from has some flavor of agentic and some flavor of how do I put AI on top of it. So that's also getting disrupted. So these are the two dimensions: building it, one; operating it, two.
Okay, so from your opinion, which side is moving faster right now? And this question is to both of you. So is it building AI ready infrastructure, or is it using AI to transform operations?
Roy, you want to take a stab at it? Then I'll go for it.
Sure. I can take a stab at it. I think what I'm seeing is fundamentally the building part is going faster because of the visibility and the amount of money being thrown at it, right? So people are rushing. It's kind of like the old gold rush where they're grabbing money and rushing to build these data centers and building the networks very rapidly because the capex is available. And as long as they can get a hold of those GPUs or XPUs, they're trying to throw it and get it up and running as soon as possible because they're worried that they can't monetize it, or they're worried that at some point that there is depreciation of the assets. Although that's not actually quite happening because some of the prices of H200, the spot prices, are actually going up, not going down, because there's over demand and lack of supply. But regardless, I think because of the rush, they're trying to do that networks for AI and trying to figure that out very quickly. The second part of it, which is actually just as important and maybe much more important in the long term as well, is the operational aspect, as Vishal says. And that is, how do I run these a lot more efficiently? How do I run this more correctly? How do I tweak my outcomes, right? And I don't think people are sufficiently thinking about that at this point in time, because it's like, oh, that's the day two problem, right? It's like, let me get day zero, day one going first, and I'll worry about day two later. But fundamentally, I think I am seeing a slow shift, at least from my perspective, in terms of trying to optimize and trying to get value out of the tens of millions or hundreds of millions that you've invested in those GPUs and infrastructure. How can I tweak the network so that I can get the outcomes and the returns that I'm looking for? And that is an in process right now.
Yeah. Adding to that, right? I mean, there's a lot of funding getting into building the networks. That's a common knowledge. You do
Yes.
Google, find out how much it is going. So
Yeah.
clearly, building the networks for the AI workload, there's a lot of funding happening there, a lot of build outs happening there. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
But in parallel to that, how do you use AI to monetize them better? And what I would like to say here is that the KPI, for networks is changing. It
Mhm.
used to be like uptime,
Yeah.
right? That used to be the KPI in cloud era and everything.
Mhm.
But now the KPI is the usage,
Yeah,
uh,
that's right.
and it's actually primarily driven by the expensive GPUs, right? Like you
Mhm.
said, the
Mhm.
price is going up and everything. So you don't want to buy a very pricey GPU and
Yeah.
then sitting there and not performing. And because of that, the KPI of networks also have changed, right?
Yeah.
So uptime is not anymore the thing, and that's where having this notion that this whole system runs as one, that notion which NVIDIA has put together, AI factory, is making sense, because this is like a whole
Mhm.
single machine, like a conveyor belt kind of a system, that if one thing breaks down in between, your whole production capability, which in terms of tokens, right, that goes down, right? So essentially that's what is happening. But I'll take another stab at it, that the companies who are so money is huge in building this AI factories and everything. So that's one piece of it, and there's a huge demand from that side. But from enterprise point of view, who are not deploying GPUs today, they are starting just a baby step right now. So they are getting there, but then also they are looking at, because they have a lot of different tools today for automation,
Mhm.
right? A lot of different tools, and they are actually looking at how do we consolidate these things
Mhm.
in essentially a single AI layer, right? So the network operations, network SRE teams for the large organization, they are doing the internal push to essentially putting the AI agentic systems, and they are getting ready, because this AI factory will get to enterprise pretty soon. We like to think that after the build out of this new cloud and sovereign cloud, which is happening right now, it will start to get into the enterprises. And if you put together all enterprise deployment, that will be way bigger than you put together new clouds and sovereign. But it will be a long tail, but it's gonna be there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Agreed.
Yeah, and also since you touched on KPIs, you mentioned in your book that the network is now part of the compute system. Vishal, what do you mean by that in practical terms?
Yeah, I mean, let's look at, right, why people need networking. Right, people need networking to basically attach the compute together.
Mhm.
Right now, in terms of when there used to be applications which need the CPU cycles, it was not those in load incentive kind of applications which needs a lot of computing power and everything. So you can run the application in CPUs, and this is why the KPI used to be uptime. Right, the network usage is somewhere between 40 to 60%, and that used to be called a very good network. Right, but now come to GPU, right? It's a huge data crunching machines, right? And the KPI has changed from uptime to 80 to 90% usage, right? So at one side, you have a compute which can take a lot of data, right? And the other side, the KPI, business KPI, has changed towards usage, right? So the network has to be be in unison with your with your compute. So if your network is not delivering, uh, why you are spending millions of dollars in compute, right? So basically, networking architecture has to be built into the exponentially increasing compute power which you are putting, and that essentially was the message in NVIDIA, GTC. If you really see, they are coming up with new networking designs to be able to cater to the computing power which is going 50x or 35x is what I remember from one of the chart, right? So these things have to work in unison, and it's not just network, by the way, storage as well is coming there, right?
Yeah.
um, and with all that thing, with the definition of visibility, monitoring, security, everything is getting changed. So networking is just one part of it, but yeah, the tooling and everything on top also has to become part of it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. I agree. I was going to say I agree with Vishal completely on that one, and a lot of the people that we're speaking with who build networks, it's no longer uptime. What they're looking at for even pre-training or for inferencing new metrics like model flops utilization, right? How much of your GPUs are you actually using, for the actual outcome that you're looking for? And the networking, I think, as Vishal points out, is a critical element in enabling higher token efficiency, for inferencing, or higher efficiency for pre-training. And even though it's a 10-15% part of the equation, right, in terms of obviously the GPUs are very expensive, but the amount of influence it has on the actual outcomes and the KPIs, it can be quite significant. So agreed, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, so this is not a theoretical anymore. It's basically starting to affect the infrastructure, architecture, operations, and business decisions now.
Yes. Yep.
So let's get into one of the biggest tensions right now in this space. And Vishal, I have this question for you first. So where does vertical integration make sense, and where should enterprises push for openness and more multi-vendor flexibility?
Yeah, so look, I mean, I have talked about this very openly in the book. So, the technologies which are, changing pretty fast, and you want to deploy them today. So basically, technology changing fast and time to deployment is very fast. Those things you should go and just deploy vertically integrated solution, because you want to go into all open source and all these kind of things. It's going to take time, right? And all this stuff. So for what it means is that if you are selling GPUs, get the best GPU out there from the best availability, because this essentially you want to be part of the market sooner and faster and everything, right? But then the things which makes it operational and your stickiness, because now you have to think for operations part, right? The operations part is something that the cost of token will keep on going down, right? And if you have built a system which does not, where the operational cost is not going down, then you will have a problem, right? The costs will keep on going up, and while the competition, the token price will keep on going down. And if you have not built it for something that where you have the moat, first of all, in your operations, wherein you can control it at a level that it can go down alongside with your competition, then you will have a problem, right? So one side, you have to keep up with the latest and greatest technology. So that's basically the innovation coming from companies like NVIDIA and AMD. But the operation part, by the way, as you can know, right, NVIDIA and GPU, they create a very good GPUs and very good networking and all these kind of things, but they don't tell you that how to operate your networks and everything, right? So that's where you need to look for the open systems, which enables you for future-proof infrastructure, which enables you to embrace any innovation which happens in the future, and which enables you to cut down the cost of per token delivered, and you control it, right? Because you're going to see the competition very, very fast and very nicely. So open, where you basically you control the things and everything, and vertically integrated, where time to market is very, very important, and your competitions are innovating faster there. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah. So Roy, do you think the market is moving in that same direction, or do you still see most buyers leaning toward bundle stacks because they feel simpler, or they're used to those?
I think it depends on sort of who you are, right? I think if you look at the hyperscalers themselves, hyperscalers are unique and special. They have a lot of in-house expertise. They have a lot of custom elements. And so in those situations, they usually can buy even components, even from an NVIDIA or the like, and then they can build it into their own architecture because they can manage it. They're special. But by and large, from an enterprise perspective, right, even the neoclouds, they are buying into the reference architectures that NVIDIA provides, and and AMD likewise for that. So I think they are buying into the architecture, like you look at the NVL72 or 144, these are I think they're buying into the whole system because NVIDIA wants to sell it to you as a system, and that's where you get a guarantee that the architecture works, that the system works. But I do agree with Vishal, which is that in many of the reference architectures, it provides you with the components that you have to get, and the interoperability testing is there. But the operational aspect of it, right, sort of the NOS and the observability layer and the management layer, that tends to be open, because that's not something that I think NVIDIA has invested a lot in. In fact, they want to keep it open because they like to have partners in that ecosystem. And so that is the part where I'm seeing that, there is flexibility, there is choice, for enterprises, and that is where we'll see. And over time, there will be more and more disaggregation, but that's not going to happen for some time. I think for the time being, because people want the outcome very quickly when they spend, their tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars on those GPUs, they will probably stick with those reference architectures that's sort of mandated by either AMD or NVIDIA.
And Roy, are there any practical signals that tell a leader their current network strategy may not be good enough at the moment for the AI era?
I think I think there are metrics that, so if I am a CIO or head of networking at an enterprise, right, and I'm looking at what I have today, I think you have to be clear about, in the AI era, right, the transformation that you do is based on what your business needs at that point in time. So not all businesses will run networks for AI, meaning that they're not necessarily doing pre-training inside, right, or fine-tuning even. They're running, models somewhere else on someone else's infrastructure, like at the hyperscaler, for instance. In that case, their focus should be, how do I operationalize AI in my networks across all the services that I use, right? So that's a different problem. And that's more an AI operations problem. Observability, agentic operations, keep costs down, keep it more secure, deploy faster. In the situation when enterprise has some amount of, private data centers, or is in fact building some of these networks or building their own sovereign inferencing or sovereign AI, in those situations, then I think they do have a chance. I think, I don't think you can say, well, you're not up to par at this point in time, because I don't think people know what par is with regard to these AI infrastructure, right? This is relatively new. And I think to the extent that they are building new, because a lot of this is going to be greenfield, then they should look to the state of the art. They should look at best practices, from the various vendors like Aviz, right? And see what is the art of the possible when they do that, because they have a chance to get it right. And again, I think back to what Vishal was saying, I totally agree with him. Understand what your KPIs are. Uptime is table stakes, right? Forget uptime, right? Is what is the efficiency or token efficiency or the outcome efficiency that you're looking for as a system, right? Not as a network, but as a system. How do you measure that? How do you see that? And when it's not ideal, how do you optimize that, right? I think that's the part that I'm not sure people are thinking about. It's a system yet. And this extreme co-design example that Jensen kept saying, right? Extreme co-design. I think that needs to trickle into the enterprise as well, to say, it is a co-design. It is a system. I need to think about it as such. Back to what Vishal was saying.
So just adding to that, right? Computing becomes accelerated computing. It's going to happen, before you know it, it's going to get to that point, right? And if I I was listening to you, Roy, and then just this thought came in my mind, is that the signal which you should look for is that, are you able to achieve things fast with your current strategy? Are you able to achieve the same fast thing with a considerable future-proof design, so that tomorrow if some technology changes, how easy you will be able to embrace that, right? And while you do these two things, are you paying more or are you paying less, right? And you should ask these three questions, right? And if you are paying exponential for just getting to the next stage, well, look, I mean, you need to see that, okay, for the GPU cycles, maybe yes, because everyone is paying for it. But then what standardizations with these hyperscalers have done, right? Or the neo cloud providers are doing, right? So you need to look for the things that, like any other hardware thing, there will be a pressure on, commoditization will keep on happening. So how do you actually leverage that commoditization via standardizing at least one layer?
Yep.
You have to decide on what layer you are standardizing, where it makes easier for you to embrace that changing technology. And that's a question you should be asking. Run some simulations that, let's say a supply chain issue happens, or the vendor you have chosen, stops innovating that fast as compared to what they are doing right now, right? What if they basically increase the price 100x, right, 100%? Where I will leave to, right? So all that question needs to be asked, and based on that, you will get your signals. Actually, you will get the answers right away. I mean, when you start asking these questions.
So if I'm a CIO or infrastructure leader listening to this podcast, and I want to be I want to move with the speed of the market, and I want to act now. So where do I begin and how?
Oh, I mean, I can go first. I think fundamentally, the CIO, needs to do her or his research into the state of the industry today and be open-minded about it. I mean, it's not going back to the incumbents that you've known and maybe loved or hated, for the last 20 years, right? I mean, those are suddenly part of the equation, and you should look at those. But I think back to what Vishal was saying, there is standardization going on, and there are a lot more that we know than we did before. And AI makes things different, right? So the CLI that you were used to previously, and you know and love, and you're so proud of the fact, I think that's changed dramatically. Pick the area that you want to standardize or that's already standardized, and if that gives you more options, gives you more freedom, and gives you an abstraction layer on which to build your operational infrastructure, right? That's the place I would look. And I think across all the major vendors, I mean, at the NOS level at least, Sonic is the place that I would look first, right? For sure. And then above the Sonic layer, I mean, that gives you the NOS. It doesn't give you the operational layer. Then the question is, at the operational layer, what capabilities do you need to build in-house? Who are you going to rely on? What kind of best practices are you going to put in place? And what does that stack look like? I think that's a question that they need to ask themselves, because Vishal's right. The underlying architecture for the networks for AI will likely change many more times in the next 5 years, because the model architecture changes. Pre-filled decode is the best right now, but who knows what it could be next year or next 6 months. But if you've built the operational layer right, and you've picked the right abstraction layer, then the underlying infrastructure can change, and the architecture of your network can change, but the operation aspects of the network are not going to change that dramatically. A network is a network is a network in some ways. How you manage it, how you observe it, how you get KPIs out of it, that shouldn't change. And I think that's the part that you want to invest in and have a strategy around. So I agree with Vishal. It's always good to have a conversation with him and to see what he's thinking, based on what the customers are telling you. So yeah.
Well, this is good. Thank you, Roy. I'll actually add one more point here, right? So it's two. One is a long answer and the other one is a short one, right? So the long answer is that start playing some simulations in your head that how your what is your business KPI you want to achieve in next 2 to 3 years, and what does it mean for your infrastructure, right? And when I say infrastructure, like what workloads you want to run, how much bandwidth it will take, and everything. And from the operations side, how much will it increase as per your footprint will increase, or you will keep it flat, or how you're going to use AI for the return of investment and doing some of the things which AI is clearly capable to do, right? So just a matrix, and then start asking the question, and you will start to see the answer emerge from those questions in itself. And there is some tables and everything. I've put it in the book. You can actually look at it, right? So that's a long answer in addition to what Roy said. The short answer is just hit me up on LinkedIn, right? That's a short answer. I can actually share my knowledge with what I have talked to 1,000, 2,000 plus customers, and I can talk about it very well in 30 minutes.
Awesome. This personal touch.
Codify Vishal into LLM. Ask Vishal LLM, right? Chat with Vishal. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, see, one thing is there in this book. I was actually thinking about that this book should not become a Aviz book, right? So I did a Control F on the digital copy of this book. So Aviz shows up like 6 times in this book, right? 3 times in the preface, where and then a couple of times in the reference. In between the whole book, we don't talk Aviz at all. Yeah. We talk the methodology on what customers. It's essentially a outcome of so many meetings which we have had with different executives.
Right. So just going back to making it practical, what would you tell that same leader to prioritize this quarter? Roy and Vishal, discussion is.
I think a lot of it depends on their business needs and business priorities, right? A lot of them driven by what their CEO or the board are driving them to do. But if they are in fact looking at trying to build GPU clusters and not just using someone else's, then I think it does matter in terms of what your operational strategy not just your purchase and your day 0, day 1 strategies, but think about your day 0, day 1, day 2 strategy as a totality, because that affects the overall system outcomes. And I think that's an important thing to think about. Not just look at your billions of dollars in your bank so you can go buy GPUs or XPUs, but think about the overall system outcomes that you're trying to get to, because that's the way that the business will be measuring you on.
Right.
Well, look, I will go one step ahead. I'll say that whatever the business or the board and whatever is where you are busy in, as a leader, people are busy always. There is always firefight, right, going on and all these kind of things. I would say set up some time and actually start thinking on today, because it's not the matter of if you will be asked this question, it's the matter of when.
Yeah.
Right. And the problem is that this thing is changing so fast that you need to be up to date on what will be your strategy on when the question will come to you, and it is on the both dimensions, right? Putting GPUs, that's the networks for AI, and AI for networks, for how would you make the agentic and everything. So I would say business priority is of course your daytime job, but your evening job is essentially being the leader in this space, right? And your question was around leaders, Ilona. So I'm answering it like a leader, right? You're put some evening time and figure out what's going on in market, and start making a thought process, a thesis, that how you will embrace this thing. And that should start like right now on your leader level. You implement it, when you implement it is fine, right? That's the implementation part. But a thought process as a leader has to start now. If you're not thinking about it, then start thinking about it, start asking the right question. In subconscious mind of your teams, start planting the seeds that this thing gonna come, and when it comes, how we gonna do it, right? So conversation has to start, research has to start, right? And that understanding that what it means for your business, those thought process has to start right now. Implementation, of course, like Roy said, when the business needs it, you should be ready at that point of time.
Yes, and just to finish it up on a fun note, so if the audience remembers just one thing from this whole conversation, what should it be? Roy, let's start with you.
I would say that, even with AI, I mean, all the experience that you have in terms of building and running networks, that doesn't quite go away, right? The shiny new objects comes, but there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of methodology and frameworks and thinking that we've built over the years and experience in networks, and that doesn't go away with AI. So I think it serves people well to remember that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
this is a good one.
And I will just say that, look, the one thing which you should just take out from this is that the length of the status quo, definition of a status quo, which used to be in years in the past, it is now in months, right? So starting now, iterate faster, smaller cycles, iterate faster is the new word. And especially you can see it around it, right? What it is, right? So the length of a status quo is getting shorter and shorter, right? And it will get to breakpoint faster than it used to be earlier, right? So starting today is a thing. And the another thing which I want take out, just hit me up on LinkedIn. We'll just talk. That's another thing.
This is awesome. Vishal, Roy, thank you very much for joining this podcast today. It was great having you here, and I hope to have some great conversations in the future again.
No, thank you very much for the invite. Really enjoyed my conversation with both you and Vishal, as always.
Yes.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.